Hello everyone and welcome to Delightful Dissent. It's episode 79 and today I'm talking to Christi, who is a trainer of spiritual life and leadership coaches. So welcome to the show, Christi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Matthew. Really looking forward to this chat together.
Yeah, me too, definitely. And today's assumption, we're going to be talking about this idea of being over it. And I think there's so many expectations out there about the right way to handle things and to experience things almost. And even what things are supposed to have an impact on us at all. And I definitely, for me, those expectations have not lined up with my own experience. So I'm really looking forward to kind of getting into this and exploring this. But so yeah, Delightful Dissent, if you haven't come across the show before, is a shared exploration of these things that people tend to take for granted or tend to overlook. And so I hope this gives you some ideas in your own life that can help you, but perhaps more importantly, I hope it gives you ideas about how you can go out there and challenge assumptions yourself, because this is something I'd like to be a part of everything that we're all doing all the time. And it's Delightful Dissent because yeah, we are maybe kind of, taking a different approach and disagreeing with the existing kind of received wisdom, but it's not about proving ourselves right at everyone else's expense. It's about having some fun and exploring some new possibilities and sharing those with everyone else. The show is genuinely live, so please do bear with us if there are any technical issues, and sorry for the slightly late start because we did have some slight technical issues beforehand. But also, please be aware that there may be some difficult topics. The ones in today's show that are really likely to be around trauma and recovery from trauma, and perhaps around neurodiversity related experiences as well. And please also do be aware that there might be strong language. So if that's an issue for you, then please know that that's a possibility. There aren't any perfect answers here. This is absolutely about exploring and asking questions. If you're watching live, then please do comment and we'll try and bring in those questions into the conversation. If you're listening to or watching the recording, we'll be sharing stuff about how to get in touch with either of us at the end of the show, and it's also available in the show notes. So yeah, we first met at an event through the Joyfully Different community, which is a really lovely community that's just starting up. And I was particularly struck, Christi, by I think your willingness to challenge these ideas that lead people, and including neurodivergent people, into so much shame and the idea that you're kind of doing it wrong. And so I really keen to have you, was so keen to have you on the show and so glad you could join us. But perhaps you could introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit who you are and who you like to work with, please.
Sure. Well, I am a 52-year-old menopausal woman who has just been through my angry phase. I think I'm still at the tail end of it, but yeah, I think my angry phase gave me a huge motivational life force to create Awaken Coach Institute. I'd been like creating coach training content for other schools for a really long time. And there was something about getting to a hormonal phase where suddenly it was just like I felt like flipping off the entire world and saying like, I'm not putting up with anything I don't want to put up with anymore. I'm doing life the way I want to do it. I don't think that's particularly unusual for women hitting their 50s, but particularly someone like me who is probably some sort of autistic ADHD combo, nothing diagnosed yet, but I sure do feel a lot of affinity with all of my close ones who are in that sort of camp. And so I would just say learning to coach and then becoming a leader and becoming my own CEO of my life and becoming CEO of Awaken is just a really beautiful, gorgeous, hard journey of self-discovery and unmasking and combination between uniqueness and community and all the things. So that's kind of where I am in life right now.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. And could you maybe tell us a little bit more about the kind of people that you like to work with most, please?
Yeah, I like kind of edgy people who have a little bit of defiance. I don't always I'm not always looking for toxic positivity, for sure not, or people who use spiritualized language to cover over the reality of being human. Um, whether that's like religious language or new age language or any of this stuff where you're supposed to kind of be in the state of like, everything's supposed to feel like happy, shiny, breezy. I really prefer people who want to get real. And um, so I kind of consider myself a really warm, loving mom hug kind of person. And so it's not always immediately apparent how much I really appreciate people who are going to say, hang on a second, I I disagree with that. That's not my experience. I have something different to offer. Um, even just this morning, like I tend to get my hackles up a little sometimes. Like I want to be the one who knows everything and teaches people everything. But I was in this WhatsApp group this morning, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's all these neurodivergent women who've graduated or are starting at Awaken, and they're just throwing around the most interesting ideas. I'm like, oh, this is so cool to not be the one who knows everything, to just get really curious.
I love that. Thank you. I think that for me, part of my reclaiming my neurodivergent aspects is really engaging with that curiosity and being comfortable with the curiosity, because that's not always been something that was allowed, welcomed very much previously. So yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Well, I can imagine. I mean, even in our conversation that the two of us had together, it was just so fun to be like, oh, this conversation is kind of going all over the map. Like, we know that we want to get to a point at some point where we decide on a topic today, and getting to over it, why aren't you over it yet? It went in so many interesting directions. And I just think that's really fun and cool when you don't have to stay on track, but you can kind of have all these paths as part of this overarching umbrella of wild and wonderful things that could happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think how we, it actually talks to some of the idea of being over it, and just being, it's like, okay, I've done enough with the topic for now. We can go somewhere else. So yeah, no, I thank you. Yeah. Before we get fully into it, though, have you got a quote that you'd like to share with us? Share with everyone.
Sure. I've been really enjoying reading Catherine May's work. She's an English author who um, had a recent, kind of in her 50s, autism diagnosis, and she just I just love her work. And so I'm reading her book, Wintering: The Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times. And so in relation to our topic of over it, aren't you over it yet? She says in her book, Wintering, everybody winters at one time or another. Some winter over and over again.
Mm, I love that. Yeah. So what is it that really resonates for you in that quote?
For me, it's that over and over again thing, because winter is something that will happen depending on what kind of climate you live in. But I'm living in France these days, and winter is to be expected every year. And so it's not a surprise. It's like tulips, unless they're forced to do something unnatural, are not blooming in November. Um, and so there's this reassurance and regularity about, like, what do you mean I'm going through a depression or a burnout or a this or a that again? And instead of feeling like it's some sort of moral failure or I shouldn't be doing this again, there's a gentleness about it that this is a season that is meant to happen, and you're just not supposed to be in a phase of like having brilliant ideas and tons of energy and so much force of determination to just keep pushing through all the things and constantly growing and getting better. It could very well be that you've had a 2-week blooming season in April. And that's what it's going to be for this year. There's going to be a lot of bulb reinforcement under the earth for a pretty long period of time, and that's there's just no judgment about it, which is hard because I do judge myself when I go through these like low energy dips, like what is wrong with me, instead of like, winter, that's the time that it is.
Yeah, I really like that. I would rather like to try and take that to heart. I'm not
Yeah.
entirely sure if I completely agree with it intellectually. I think when I experience them, it's a very hard thing to remember.
It's so countercultural. I mean, who does that? Who's just like, oh no, like, for the next 6 months, I'll be mostly snoozing. Like,
It's such a rebellious act to meet one's own needs and not to be
right?
put in that situation of being, of constantly feeding the other stuff. And yeah, it really is. Yeah. And I think particularly for those of us who want to do something different and change things in some way, is the idea of changing things whilst doing things in exactly the way stuff has always worked, the way the existing system works. It's unlikely to be effective. It's
Yeah.
it's hard to change things by when we're reinforcing all of the existing patterns.
Well, and that reminds me just of our topic of over it. There are these patterns, and it can get exhausting sometimes to say, like, if you're swimming upstream, I mean, a salmon's they really jump and leap upstream like once in their life. Um, but there's a lot of swimming downstream too. And so it's these patterns of like resting. Um, and just even thinking about my own life and, talking more openly about traumatic things. I had someone a couple years ago say to me, "Aren't you over it by now? Like everybody's parents did stuff back in the 70s, and I got over that in my 20s, and how can you be almost 50 and still dealing with it?" And like even this morning, I was dropping my kid off at the bus stop, and they were like, "Mom, I wish you had dealt with your shit a lot earlier. You're so much easier to be with now than you were before." And I was like, "Yeah, thanks." But we don't always, like, you don't know what you don't know until you know it. Like,
Having the resources, the knowledge, the space, the support, because this stuff there's a risk involved. It means downtime. It means vulnerability. If we're kind of constantly going, we don't actually have that much space to do that, I think. And we don't really talk about, creating these spaces where people can process and deal with stuff. And in very many ways, I think this idea of getting over it is like, well done. You were given the resources by the outside world to get over it.
yeah, and you don't know how good your resources are. I mean, I'm just thinking back at the different periods in my life when I've had counseling. And so like when I was in my late 20s or early 30s, I went through this forgiveness process. And to me, it felt like, wow, I really went through it. I went through the like truth telling and anger and acceptance and, reconciliation and all this stuff. And I really thought I had done really good work. And then I was coaching for several years, and I kind of got to be known as the forgiveness coach. I wrote a forgiveness ebook. I read like an entire shelf, like you name it, Desmond Tutu. Like I was really, really like hyper focused on forgiveness and knew like everything there was to know about it, and got really good at it and everything, and walked people through their journeys of forgiveness. And then it was like maybe 15 years later, I was hanging out with a girlfriend of mine who's a counselor. And I was just like kind of laughing and telling her some of my stories from my childhood. And she's just stopped me and she's like, this isn't okay with me. You're telling these stories with like composure and a smile on your face. And this is some of the worst stuff I've ever heard. Like, how come you don't know how to swear? Like, there should be F bombs going off when you tell these stories. And I was like, wow. And she gave me a book called Don't Forgive Too Soon. And it really struck. She's like, you did all this forgiveness, but you didn't even begin to deal with, some of the things that you still believe about yourself. And so that was a huge wake up call. And I was like, thought I was done. I thought I was over it. I'm like living my life. I'm an adult. I'm happy. And then it's like, oops, another round. And so I just think we know what we know. And at least for me, I sometimes believe what people tell me a little too easily. Like if somebody's a big forgiveness expert and they're like, these are the 7 steps and you do it, like, okay, done. And then it might be something else later, either an event or coming in contact with somebody else that joggles the whole worldview or narrative.
Yeah, that things what we don't know, we don't know. And what I think also, what's normal for us. This is one of the really difficult challenges of all of this work. And actually my own understanding of how hard things have been for me, for a variety of neurodiversity and developmental and interrelated reasons. And this idea of, well, how much effort am I putting in just to get by? How hard is this? My baseline has always been my baseline. And that's a very hard thing to know, is actually, is this something I can do something about? Could we make that better? Could we change that? That I think is a really interesting question about, and what it means to be over something. Is like, can we actually, is there scope for addressing something that we haven't addressed in this, even if we've been over it multiple times before? And I think there's another side of this, which is like, as you say, is going through these procedures that have maybe worked for other people, and actually them not really doing very much for me. And being like, oh well, I've done the thing, so this must be the place I'm supposed to be. Feels like a huge, and it's like, and then there comes this extra bit of kind of performing, masking that it has worked, because it's shameful if it hasn't. There's something wrong with you if this magic set of steps hasn't got you to where you're, in inverted commas, supposed to be.
Exactly. It's like there's this whole expectation that, you're supposed to move out of your parents' house at this age, and then being adult means that you did whatever. You bought a car or a house, or you got married, or you did whatever it was. And it reminds me of a conversation I was having with someone I really love yesterday. And they were telling me, like, I thought by this age I would be able to like do my laundry and my dishes and have a job. And I'm just finding like I love my job, but if I do the laundry, I don't have enough energy to also do my job. And it was painful to be able to say that. And you use the word shame, and there was a lot of like, oh, I hope I'm not disappointing my family members. Like I should be better than this or something. But we do have our baselines, and we need community. We're not meant to all know how to do the dishes and the laundry and go to work and do the parenting and like all in one day. Like it's sometimes things are just too much for what the mind body system can do, and we've got to like recognize I'm at 50% today. There's going to be some resting going on.
Yeah, and I think for some of us, it's understanding that for a variety of reasons, some of them intrinsic, some of them, quite a lot of them, external design decisions, really, those things are harder for us. Those things consume more resources. And so this idea that we've, this doing this should take a certain amount of whatever resources. For some people, that's less. For some people, that's more. And yet we make this assumption. And I think the over it, there's a big part of this that feels like it's around how long it takes to recover from something, essentially. And I think for some people doing some of those tasks, the recovery is negligible. It's almost not noticeable. But for others, it's huge. And the idea that we would need to rest after doing something like that it's kind of, it's really not very welcome, very allowed as an idea very often. It feels like we're expected to be, it's like, great, you've done that, now next thing. It's like, well, actually, no, that was quite depleting. And I think there's a flip side to this as well, where very often we just have different appetites and different strengths. And one of the things I've really noticed with masking and with all of this is like, actually, I can do more of this. And that's also can be quite unwelcome sometimes. I think the over it cuts both ways. It's like, why are you still doing this? It's like, because it's still valuable. I've still got energy for it. Versus someone who's like, well, actually, no, we it's like, well, there's enough. We've had enough of that. It's like, well, actually, no, I'm still getting value out of it. So there's two.
I didn't have enough of that. Yeah, right. I'm still enjoying it.
I think it's both sides that we can get in significant trouble with in this way.
Right. That other people, we put our own judgments on they're too much or they're too little, or I'm done with this topic and you should be too. And people are such glorious, varied creatures. Yeah. And it really does change your energy levels, doesn't it? When you're doing what you love versus what you have to do. And just recognizing that it might not be the same every day. Like this morning, I was just lying on that couch with my feet up, and I just, 5 pages typed so easily. Like, I'm like, oh, I was only supposed to write 3 pages, but I just wrote 5 because it was so interesting to me and I was enjoying it. But on a different day or a different topic, I might be like, I only have verbal words today. I couldn't write anything to, like, my brain is just not going to put words on paper. And then there's other times it's like, okay, at 7 p.m., I can't make sentences anymore today. Sorry. I'll be reading my book maybe, but I will not be speaking.
And I think it's a funny thing particularly, and I have very similar experiences, and I do make a lot of my living in language and words. But when I get really tired or really, really stressed and overwhelmed, I actually really struggle with language. I struggle to find the words and make the words, and the more tired and or overwhelmed I get, the harder that gets. And actually, it kind of won't come back until I've had rest.
Right? And it can be so, other people can really judge you if they don't know, because they're like, oh yeah, Matthew's such a chatterbox, or Matthew really write, Matthew can like spit that stuff out in like 30 minutes, he'll be able to write this thing for you. And that's really true. And on another day, it might not be. And so if people expect you're going to be able to have the same output consistently on a daily basis, that just might not be the case. What's depleting could take 3 days of lounging around doing nothing to recover from, where somebody else is like, what do you mean? That was a 1-hour flight. That was not a big deal. Why didn't, how come you're not doing 6 more hours of work today?
Yeah, and I find traveling is one of the really big ones for me. I also struggle to
Oh, yeah.
do work traveling. When people can sit and write, I can, in pretty much all forms of traveling, unless I'm driving myself, all I can do is stare out the window and listen to something. That's the most
Yeah.
productive I can be. Trains, planes, any of it. And to actually write and try it, it's horrible. I've never entirely pinned down why, but I don't think there's very much I can resolve that. It's too consistent across all of these other things.
Yeah, one of my favorite aunts, my Aunt Vicky, calls it letting your soul catch up to your body. She's like, there's just something about traveling that when you're going to a different place, there's so much that goes on in your heart and mind when you're transitioning. You do kind of have to let your body catch up.
Yeah, and I wonder if actually having that downtime, the changing context, it allows you to keep up with the changing context. If you're in focused on something, you don't get that shift. It takes a long while, and I need to be in that coherence to work and to do things, to actually function very often. And maybe it's actually just, I'm doing it as it happens if I have the chance to quiet down. Otherwise, I'll need that time later.
Yeah, like your body's going to make you take the time. So, but it took me a long time to figure that out. I'm somebody that's lived in several different countries during my life. And I always thought so the first time I moved to Paris from the United States, I had just gotten renters in my house, sold all my furniture, hired 3 people to replace me at my old job. Like it was massive prep to get to this big August 28 kickoff meeting for this big new project. And I got there and I was supposed to go to work every day jet lagged. And then I had to find an apartment, buy new furniture, like you name it. Like it was just a huge transition. And for some reason, I was just like, I thought that I could be working on a Friday in America and start work again on Monday in France. I was like, please don't have anybody ever do that to yourself. Like take a month on either side, like take a really long time. Transitions are rough. And I work with a lot of people who move, to hardship posts. Maybe they'll go and be in South Sudan or something. And the wisdom with these, big international NGOs is always take a week at a minimum between places where you're not in either space. You're not in Denver and then in Doha, but you're like in Portugal on the beach, just like decompressing. And a week is not too long at all to just sit and sleep and do nothing and look at the ocean, between 2 worlds that you're changing.
Yeah, I think that decompression time is a huge part of this, and it's one of the interesting things for me. I think of this need to integrate our experiences, and in a very fundamental way, trauma is just unintegrated experiences.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we have the unintegrated, unpleasant, well, I'm not sure, actually, genuinely unintegrated experiences, and having this ability to, if we continually put ourselves in positions where we are having experiences that we can't integrate in the moment, and then not giving ourselves time to integrate them, we're carrying an awful lot of unintegrated stuff that is essentially behaves like trauma, whether or not we think of it as like trauma. I suspect, maybe our brains assume that if there's always another thing, then it is something to worry about. We need to go back and process. We need this space to process. I mean, sleep is one of the big ones. So few people get enough sleep that it's like, that's what a lot of the time our brains are doing when we're sleeping, is processing all of this stuff, integrating all of this stuff, making sense of it, making it coherent. If we don't give ourselves that space, to just process something, whether or not it's seen as positive or negative or a bit of both, we're losing out on something, and we're also making it harder for us to then engage with the next thing.
Well, and I love that you brought up the sleep, because it's such a quintessential physical and mental process. I mean, it's so clearly mind body work that's going on when you sleep. And I'm just thinking for myself, sometimes I'll have 6 one-on-one conversations, coaching conversations during a day. And I always leave a 15-minute buffer in between. And I have my Spotify playlist where I have pieces of music with anger, peace, joy. Like I have these different playlists that are linked to any emotions that I may have, chosen to kind of set aside my own way of thinking or feeling about something in service of the other person. But that doesn't mean just put it off forever and forget about it. But it does mean, like, very physically, like I'll stand up out of my chair and I have like lyrical slow movements, or I have like my really kick those knees and elbows, shake stuff off. And I know which pieces of music I need and which dance movements I need to really integrate the experience physically in my body. And even then, at the end of 6 hours, I'll usually still take a whole hour of just lying around doing nothing before I'll go try to be chipper with, with people around me, because I just want to be like, wow, I've just been to so many different worlds today, and different countries and different experiences, and inside different people's thoughts and feelings all day long. And how would if I come back to me for a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's an
Honoring it.
incredibly healthy thing to do. And I think, well, particularly with autism, one of the things that shows up in autism is this delayed emotional processing like a lot of the things with autism, it's pathologized because it's different. I suspect it's actually an adaptive. Very often I suspect it's a learned adaptive skill, is that we learn that there are certain things that are overwhelming in our experience, and that we have to defer because we're not allowed to process in the moment. I have this idea of emotional intensity, and I have high emotional intensity. I process things, given free choice, I process things very fast but intensely, and that's not always something that it's helpful to do. That's not always something it's safe to do. That's not always something it's welcome to do. And so I've learned to be able to hold on to this stuff in a way that I suspect maybe is very common with autistic people, but is less common with people who aren't autistic. And there are other reasons you might develop this skill, but it's very, and it means that if we can use it intentionally, I'm sure a lot of people who work interpersonally, that ability to separate off one's own feelings from the feelings that you're trying to work with, essentially, is a really helpful thing to do. if we can consciously do it. But it still means that we need to process the feelings, and that's part of that work, for sure. So I think that's a huge thing. We don't talk about that ability to, the capacity, the ability to defer feelings and processing, because some people don't have that. A lot of people, I'm not sure, have that, and it's actually much more common, I see, in neurodivergent people, and I think it can be a really useful aspect of the work that we do.
I love that. I feel like crying hearing you say that. It's so healing, because it's like, yeah, why not look at it as a skill and a strength and something that we can really draw on and use, that we are able to like take a little time and do that work a little bit later. You don't have to have the instant explosion or the instant tears or the whatever, but you can kind of ponder things in your heart for a while and take the time. But like you said, it is intentional. It is like, I am committed to me. I'm not taking the time just for other people, but I will. And sometimes even in coaching sessions, I'll just jot down like, okay, I know I don't have time to process this right this second, but I'm going to jot it down because I need to keep my promises to myself. I will come back to me. I will settle in, either talk about it with my husband or journal it out, or whatever needs to happen to integrate, as you said.
And I love that. I think the intentionality, particularly when we have somewhat different processing needs, is really, really helpful, because to some degree the world gives you processing space by default if you process normal things in a normal way.
Normal, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in the sense of like, whilst no one's absolutely normal, there are definitely like a lot of people who experience the world in very similar ways and have quite similar needs, and then there are groups of people who have quite different needs and awareness.
Yeah,
and so
the expected way. The
right expected way. You're right. There is also a design thing where it's just how we think people work, even though no one really works like that. But you're right. In this expected way, if we happen to align with this, we get quite a lot by default. We don't really have to attend to it consciously quite as much, because the world will just supply that for us. Whereas I think if we have these different needs that differ from these expectations, then we have to be much more intentional about it and structural about it, build stuff in and say, look, actually, I have this need. I use this. I need this. Interestingly, just like you with the meetings, I have a meeting booking tool that automatically puts in space, because I know I need the space. I know I need to think and follow up and do stuff and connect back and kind of go back to that ground level before I'm actively doing and being in someone else's world again.
Absolutely. And whilst my calendar always leaves 15-minute buffers. But I think, like we were talking earlier about the integrating it into your body, but if I'm getting you right, we're also talking about integrating it into your story, like your narrative. So just like a personal example for me is, when I was a really little person, I would get pretty severely punished for sucking my thumb, and or if I was spinning around, or if I was laughing too loud. There were certain things that have just gotten kind of stuck, like physically, those are not okay movements to make. And so I've actually, as a 52-year-old, taken up the practice of thumb sucking sometimes. I still feel really weird about it, and I don't do it very often, but I kind of wish I could do it more, because it's just like the story changes when you can say, yeah, a 4-year-old, that's a really great self-soothing technique. And I don't know if that's going to be one that I go back to, although I know a lot of autistic women do that. But like, I have this lotion that I keep around, and so I'm just noticing, like a few minutes ago in this conversation, I started getting a bit emotional. And so I've got my lotion out because I'm just going to sit here and start rubbing my hands together for a little while. Took all my rings off, and I'm just going to give myself a lot of pressure on my fingers, because there's something about putting pressure on my fingers that is really helpful to help me get back and like, hey, I'm talking to Matthew here. We're doing fine. This is safe. Anybody listening is probably gonna like us just fine. You know, even if I'm sitting here wringing my fingers.
Actually, it's going to relate, I think, in a lot of cases. And one of the big things for me is when we do it, we implicitly give people permission. You know, what I don't mention, you know, because it doesn't actually show up on camera, but I'm always on camera. I always have a fidget toy. It's silent and it's a little very pleasing kind of gemstone pebble that I can always move around because it's helpful, it's calming, it's comforting, it helps center me. And it's one of the really interesting things. And I think this idea of over things, where you're making me think about actually what we're talking about is coming back to regulation, self-regulation and co-regulation, and what we are allowed to do that. You know, what is an acceptable form of self-regulation very often. And again, this is something that is very often invisible for people whose brains work in the expected way, because the world provides them with all of this, you know, provides them with a lot of opportunities and things that self-regulate. So we're all self-regulating. It's a very common thing for humans to do. However, we also have this category of things that are things that largely neurodivergent people do to self-regulate and neurotypical people don't. And we call them stims. But they are just self-regulatory behavior, but self-regulatory behavior that some people do and some people don't. And I think it's a really interesting thing to think about, this getting over something. It's like, what do I need? What opportunities for self-regulation and co-regulation actually help me in this? And what don't? Because this can be one of the other things, is like, I've found that it can be, particularly co-regulation, can be a very scary thing to seek, because what if someone doesn't understand my regulatory needs? What if they have a practice that they think is going to be helpful that actually pushes me in the other direction? Not even a worse state.
Patting my arms instead of giving me a really strong hug, and then I'm like, get away. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Or if and like touch is like the wrong kind of like contact, completely, and it's so challenging to work with that, and to so I think we can learn that it's not safe to be with other people, and the you know, and sometimes not safe to do our own self-regulatory behavior. Both you and I were actively taught as children, by the sound of it, that what we would choose to do in a self-regulatory area was not permissible. Right. And we were punished for self-regulation.
Right.
And then what do? You know, and I think this idea of like, and then you're punished for not being over something. It's like, exactly. How do you win?
It didn't even hurt. It wasn't that bad. And why are you so upset? And all this kind of stuff, those messages we've heard, which is why I like reframing the narrative. And I think for a lot of us, either diagnosed or not, like people who are suddenly discovering the whole world of neurodivergence and ADHD and autism and dyslexia and all the things, the narrative might have been, you're a drama queen, you're lazy, you're too much, you're, you know, whatever, you don't belong here for whatever reason. And then to go back and like retell that story as like, no, I did belong, and I wasn't too much. I needed regulation, and I'm going to let myself squeeze my thumbs if I need to now, I'm going to let myself lie on the couch for an hour. And it's really living in defiance of the expected rules, and to actually stand up for yourself and your boundaries and say, no, this is what I need in this moment. This is my preference. I can use my voice and speak up for myself instead of just trusting that they said it. Therefore, this is how you have to be. But it takes a lot of courage to do that, especially if what you're doing is, considered weird or wrong.
Yeah, courage. And I think in my experience, kind of trial and error, actually.
Yeah.
Because it's taken me a long time to figure out that these were things. If you're told over and over and over again that this isn't a thing, you kind of start to believe it. And so I think like not attending to these things at all, not thinking about them, not treating them as something requiring intervention, attention, some that I kind of, is if you get told that enough, it's incredibly, you start to internalize it. And so you're like, you tell yourself you don't need this, you don't need that.
Yeah. Well, and especially when it's teasing, and I think a lot of us have had some teasing or even bullying going on. But I remember just a few years ago, I was at a women's retreat, and one of the women was like howling with laughter in the morning. She just thought it was so funny. She's like, "Oh, I saw Christi sleeping last night, and she had her arms like this. She looked like a dinosaur, and she just thought it was so hilarious." And it was yesterday that I would happen to be, thank God for Facebook, I was on a, autistic women's Facebook group, and there was this whole thread about like T-Rex arms. I was like,
Yeah,
oh, okay. All right. That's a new one for me. But like thousands of other people already knew that. And they're not laughing. They're just like, yeah, a lot of us hold
that's
our
just it's a
wrists
comfortable way to be. And I think, and these things are grounded in really fundamental things and fundamental differences. And I think there's, some of the autistic, a lot of the stuff that's associated with it is associated with a lot of the co-occurrent things. So many people have hypermobility. It's more comfortable to hold hypermobile joints in certain ways.
Yes.
And
yeah, I've got EDS, and that's actually one diagnosis that's really clear for me. I'm coming in with super puffy eyes today. I feel like I'm out of a horror show because I just poisoned myself yesterday by eating. I ate a kind of squash that I haven't eaten since I was punished for not eating it when I was a little kid. And so I just ate it yesterday, and my whole face swelled up, my eye, like it was like so puffed up this morning, and I still feel like kind of whatever. But I'm like, no wonder my little kid self refused to eat that squash.
Yeah,
It's poison to my body,
and this idea of that we all respond the same, we all like a thing and don't like a thing. That's one of the really big challenges. And interestingly, I found this, and this is a big one for working in organizations, actually. For anyone who's involved in working with neurodivergent people or is neurodivergent themselves in an organization, there's a lot of the incentives that, like the positive incentives, feel like punishments.
Yeah.
And so we're setting people up in these situations, and for me, one of the things was always like, great, so someone is rewarded by being singled out, pointed out, and like asked to speak in front of a large group of people about something. That is punishment for a lot of people. And so if that's your idea of praise and reward, then what you're really doing is training people to avoid that.
Count me out. I will not be speaking. Yeah. But that's the thing with like empathy, why it's so hard to get it right, and why we need to just keep coming back to that word curiosity. It's because what might be praise or a wonderful thing or empathetic to one person might be the opposite. Like, do you want eye contact when somebody's comforting you or not? Do you want a hug or not? And just because I like empathy to be shown to me a certain way doesn't mean that you like it that way. And so just wondering and not knowing and asking the question, like, how could I, if I really wanted to show you that I appreciate you, how would I do that for you? Or if I really wanted to show you that I understand you and empathize, what would that be like for you?
Such an important question. And I've come across, there's this idea of hard empathy and soft empathy. Soft empathy being empathy born of shared lived experience, and hard empathy being empathy not born of shared lived experience. And I think, for some people, the only empathy that they've ever been developed or been invited to develop is soft empathy, and they're actually not really aware that another form exists. Whereas I think, again, and it's one of the interesting things for those of us who work interpersonally and are neurodivergent, is we've had to develop this thing to a very high degree very often just to cross that gap, which has its own costs and has its own effort, and the idea that we're expending a ton of effort to do that. So of course we need recovery time afterwards, because we're actually doing something much harder.
Well, it's like speaking a different language, and first of all, figuring out, like, are you speaking Portuguese or are you speaking German? Which language are you even using? And then there's so many variables, and so getting it right. I mean, we're just such unique humans, and we all need each other, and so being willing to soften up and not assume my way is the right way, or what they said is the right way, or the expectation is the right way, but just being willing to say, I don't know, what feels good to you, what feels good to me right now, today, what's the need, what's the preference.
I think that's such a good summary. Yeah, moving beyond this idea of actually, what do we need now? What feels good now? Meeting what need and how? Yeah, completely. I think that's such a healthy question to be able to ask, instead of why aren't you over it yet?
Right. How come your grief is taking you 3 years when my person died, I was done in a month, and
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that moving beyond that idea, and also being able to turn that to ourselves. I think being able to ask that question of ourselves, because for me that's often the hardest.
Well, especially as autistic or neurodiverse people, some of us have really impaired interoception and proprioception, and so like even knowing, like, do I have to pee? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Do I need a weighted blanket? Like it takes some effort to go in and even know. It's like almost like you have to be on a 10-minute timer or something all day long to remember to offer yourself nourishment and support and get what you need. Because some of us have just like pushed through and not had our bodies even tell us what we need until it's like, oh shoot, I just got dehydrated and now my brain won't work.
And I wonder how much of this, we can actually move that almost in the other direction. Is we've spent so long being told and telling ourselves that we're not supposed to be listening to what we're feeling. We can't trust that. So the brain goes, oh right, well, very sensibly goes, I can't trust any of those signals then. And so those interoceptive, signals, we just tend to lose instead, and just be like, because we've learned to discard them. I wonder whether for a lot of autistic people that this isn't so much of a core thing, but we learn to distrust how we feel because we're taught that developmentally, because it's not, in inverted commas, normal or appropriate, or we don't feel right about things. And so what we then learn to do, you kind of can't cut off some of those signals. You're either distrusting all of them or trusting all of them. And I wonder how much of the interoceptive difficulties actually come from the fact that we've just learned over time that we're not supposed to trust those signals in general, and some of those signals are supposed to be trustworthy, and it's like, how do we differentiate? Whereas I think for other for neurotypical people, they're taught to trust all of those signals.
Yeah, I think it really depends on so much. I've wondered that so often. Like the way that I was raised was very specifically do not trust. And both that was said verbally, physically, in every way. Do not trust your emotions. Do not trust your body. Only trust your thoughts. And this journey of coaching and coach training has really turned so much of that on its head. And it's like, no, it's so important to be aware and to wonder and to get in touch and to learn yourself. And others, co-regulate and self-regulate both, and know how to ask for what's needed.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a good. Thank you for that, for summarizing, for wrapping that up so neatly as well. I think that's a lovely way to start to bring it to a close. If people want to get in touch with you, we've got your website, your LinkedIn, and an upcoming coaching program for neurodivergent women in the show notes. Do you want to say anything about those, particularly the upcoming coaching program, probably?
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, I love to stretch myself, and I feel like this is sort of like teaching at the edge of my knowledge, to the extent that we're really co-creating something together. Which is always, I mean, Awaken Coach Institute was really built by a community. And, you know, I interviewed so many different coaches, you know, videos and writing and everything to put together really robust content. And then this idea, just as I've been exploring my own potential autism, ADHD, whatever it is, but like just the way that my mind body is in the world, I've started inviting, at least for this first round, neurospicy women only. And it's really cool because it's selling out really quickly. And it's not at all like, there's a lot of coach trainings out there that are like, this is a program for ADHD, and we're going to teach you time management skills, or like they're going to help you cope with life better kind of thing. And this is not that at all. It's really for us, by us. Just, we're going to get 9 women together, and we're going to create, like, how do we, first of all, we're going to celebrate ourselves, because I think neurodiverse folks are just the most wonderful listeners, have such great empathy. The way that you hold a coaching conversation is exactly our style. It's purposeful, deep. There's not a lot of small talk. It has structure to it and flexibility. And so I just think we make awesome, awesome coaches. And it's the kind of career that's so great for neurospicy people, because you're not following someone else's rules where you have to do 9 to 5. Like, you can really flex. If you're a night owl, you could coach from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. if you felt like it. Like, you can find your clients who are either awake or in Australia or whatever, and build your life the way you want to do it. So we're going to have a lot of celebration. And then we're also just going to be really free to dissent about things. Like, yeah, you know, I had a coach who did this, and that was not helpful. This is how I would want to be coached, and this is how curious I want to be about other people. So I'm going into it with this real mix of like just excitement and that jitteriness, because it's the first time we're having it with only neurodiverse folks. Like, I think neurodiverse people have been invited, just have shown up at Awaken Coach Institute anyway, because of the way we structure the classes and how intimate and deep, and, you know, they're very small groups. But this one is the first time that I'm like, no, we're going to really open the conversation and be super open and vulnerable to the extent people would like to, and make it our own and decide, no, this is how we want to coach and this is how we want to celebrate us. And I'm putting myself in the us without a diagnosis, because I think we should all be able to do that.
This discovery is different to diagnosis.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. And there are good reasons to seek diagnosis, and there are good reasons not to, and it's entirely a personal decision.
Absolutely.
So yeah, completely. No, well, thank you so much. I think that's really, really interesting. You also mentioned before we went live that that you have a YouTube channel. So what's the name of the YouTube channel so people can search for it?
Oh, that is, I would look for Awaken Coach Institute. I think it's Awaken Coach Institute with a bunch of numbers after it. And
okay.
some of it is for coaches, but I think there's also some really lovely things in there. We've done a webinar on loneliness and one on fierce compassion for yourself. We've just got a lot of really heartwarming, supportive, encouraging stuff in there. So feel free to take a look.
That sounds lovely. And is there a link from the website as well, I take it? I guess you can find your way there.
No, I probably didn't remember to do that, but maybe.
That would be a good thing to do, I think.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Super. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. A really lovely conversation, and I hope it was, I really enjoyed that. So yeah, thank you.
What a pleasure to be with you, Matthew. I'm really glad we met, and I'm really thankful that you're offering this to the world.
Oh. Thank you. Yeah, I really, it's such an important thing, and I really hope that it was useful out there to everyone in the audience as well. And if it was, please share it. That's kind of how it all spreads. And check out past and upcoming stuff on LinkedIn and YouTube as well. And again, you can find this as a podcast, or if you search for Delightful Dissent on whichever podcast platform you use. We're at our new home now, which is MatthewBellringer.com, though I am still working through this backlog of episodes, but keep an eye out for updates. Our next recording, I'm going to be talking to Alice Hargreaves, who is a social entrepreneur working to close the disability employment gap in the UK. And we're going to be talking about the idea that you should be productive. So really, strong link, I think, to this one.
Yeah.
And we all have to get stuff done, but there's so much pressure to do it a certain way at a certain time and get on with it, and kind of almost for the sake of it. So I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion and kind of to continue this exploration. That's going to be at 5 p.m. UK time on Thursday, the 5th of October. So I hope very much to see you then. But in the meantime, please do go out there and make some delightful dissent of your own. Thanks and goodbye.